Hello, friends, and welcome to Noble Literature Classes. With this lecture, we shall turn our focus to Samuel Taylor Coleridge. He was one of the most learned persons, like he knew Greek, Latin, Hebrew, German, French, Italian, even Sanskrit also. So, we will see how he was responsible for adapting the German philosophy into the British Romantic theory. And now, through a close look at his Biographia Literaria, published in 1817, we shall try to explore his main distinctions which he gave between natural and transcendental philosopher, primary and secondary imagination, between imagination and fancy, and then we will define these terms which he defined, such as organic wholes, the symbols, and the concrete universals. So Coleridge lived in England from 1772 to 1834, and he was kind of an addict, like he consumed so much alcohol and opium also, which actually he thought inspired his senses. And besides all that, he had so many friends, everybody respected him and everybody wanted to be his friend in those days. मतलब कि इनका खुद का भी कोई घर नहीं था, कभी कभी तो he would spend entire weeks at other friends' places and they would not object, they would be glad to help him with his career, with his life. So that was the character of Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Now, in those lyrical ballads of 1798, he was supposed to write almost half of the poems in that book, but actually he wrote only 4 poems. अब वो अलग बात है कि इनकी जो पोएम्स थी दे वर सो ह्यूज, दे वर सो लेंथी दैट इट कंज्यूम्ड ऑलमोस्ट 1/3 ऑफ द बुक इटसेल्फ. मतलब वो कुछ भी लिखते थे तो वो उसमें पूरी तरह से खो जाते थे. नाउ लेट अस लुक एट वन ऑफ द मेजर वर्क्स विच वी आर सपोज टू डू. His work of criticism, his autobiography, Biographia Literaria. It was published in 2 volumes in 1817 and contained 23 chapters. Now, some people might say that it is a work of plagiarism because he seems to have copied Immanuel Kant, Schelling, Fichte, or some other German writers just like they have written it. But still, it's just a concept by other people. Now, two opposing but complementary types of thinkers have been introduced by Coleridge. One is the natural philosopher, and the other is the transcendental philosopher. Let us try to understand what they are. Coleridge says that the natural philosopher begins his journey, his theoretical and his aesthetic education, with the nature. Nature here means the objective world or the reality. And he then takes that knowledge and he uses his method of reasoning by induction. And using that induction method, he will then reach the final subjective truths or the general laws of the mind. So Coleridge says that if the natural philosopher is unable to complete his journey, then that failure will make him fall into materialism. Materialism is like if somebody is not able to realize the ultimate truths just by working on the objective reality, then he will definitely fall into the materialistic world. And he says Wordsworth was a true natural poet because he was able to transform the natural into supernatural, or the mundane subjects or the rustic subjects into exotic, and his observations into mystical perceptions. Let's talk about the transcendental philosopher. A transcendental philosopher, according to Coleridge, he starts his journey from the mind and he takes on those basic truths or the universal facts, some abstract facts, and he tries to bring them down to the our real world, to the objective reality, by using his methods of logic and reasoning. So he's deductively coming downwards, unlike the natural philosopher who was inductively going upwards. Now, Coleridge says that if a failure is there in the way of transcendental philosopher, that if he is not able to complete his journey, then there is a risk of him falling into the pit of idealism. And you can also call it solipsism. मतलब वो अपने माइंड के अंदर ही घुसा रह जाएगा. He will not be able to link his thoughts with the real world. So that is important for him. Now, he says that both philosophers, if they are able to complete their metaphysical journey, then they will meet at this single nexus point where the subjective meets into the objective and the objective meets into the subjective. Only imagination can make this fusion or the marriage between the subject and the object possible. He also coins this new term plastic. It's a Greek term and it means the power of imagination to fuse opposites. Now let us talk about the primary and secondary imagination. Coleridge says that primary imagination is the one when we are possessed by some higher power which we are not aware of. For example, when we don't know where our idea has come from. An example could be when he was writing Kubla Khan, he did not want to lose that inspiration that he had. He was hallucinating on opium and suddenly he had this idea of a wonderful palace in the hills of China, and he just, as soon as he woke up, he wanted to write it down because he was not sure that he will be able to recreate that memory, because it was the pure memory, the original memory, and therefore he wanted to write it down as soon as possible. Although some stranger came in and that Kubla Khan remained unfinished forever, but still it is one of his greatest masterpieces. So the primary imagination for Coleridge, it is the one when we are experiencing something for the first time and our beliefs and our old knowledge, it is nowhere in the picture. The secondary imagination for Coleridge is more important, and in this a poet takes the raw material from his old memories or his beliefs or whatever his knowledge bank is, and he takes that raw material and then he has this inspiration to form that raw material into something meaningful. He wants to break down his old knowledge and convert or transform it into something new, a something vital form. Now he says that the secondary imagination, it dissolves our knowledge, it dissipates it and diffuses it in order to recreate. If you want an example, you can see what he did with the German philosophy. He took these theories of the German philosophers from like Immanuel Kant and all these, and then he created his own version of the romantic theories, like the primary and secondary imagination, like the transcendental and the natural philosopher. So that is how he says that the secondary imagination works. Now he also distinguishes between imagination and fancy. मतलब कोलरिज से पहले इमेजिनेशन और फैंसी को दोनों वर्ड्स को सिमिलर तरीके से यूज़ करते थे एंड देयर वाज नॉट कंसिडर्ड एनी डिफरेंस बिटवीन बोथ दीज टर्म्स. बट कोलरिज के लिए इमेजिनेशन बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट थी, देयरफॉर ही गेव अ डिफरेंस बिटवीन इमेजिनेशन एंड इवन फैंसी. For Coleridge, fancy is like a lesser power. It does not have a power to create something new. It can only rearrange the knowledge which we have and just make something out of it. But the power of imagination, it is far higher and it has the power to actually create something new which we have not seen or which we have not shown to somebody else. So you should not confuse both these terms with primary and secondary imagination. They are different things. Now, after giving us distinctions between a poet and about imagination, Coleridge moves on to define poetry, and he does so by studying Shakespeare. अब अगर नियो क्लासिकल राइटर्स को आप याद करें, those critics, they used to say that in Shakespeare's work, although his works are of a genius and it is seen that he has written great individual passages, but there is a sense of decorum or a sense of unity which is missing in the works of Shakespeare. अब उन नियो क्लासिकल्स को काउंटर करने के लिए Coleridge demonstrated that the unity in Shakespeare is there, but it is much deeper than in a conventional play that just follows some old rules. So he came up with this idea of organic wholes. Coleridge says that a poem should be an organic whole, in which the whole not only contains the part, but each part contains the whole in it. For example, if you say the DNA, our whole body is made up of that single DNA, and still that DNA, it is still capable of creating the whole body again. Or you can refer to a seed of an apple. It can not only create an apple, but it can also create an entire garden of apples itself. That is the power in a seed. So that is the organic whole that Coleridge is talking about, and although he refers it to Shakespeare's plays. For Coleridge, symbols were more preferable for creating the organic wholes as compared to the allegories. He said that allegories are just an abstract notion, some abstract idea, and it is merely translated into a picture language. And for example, the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other shoulder, they are talking to the person and they are talking to him, but it does not convey something real that the reader or the listener can connect to. But on the other hand, if you see symbols, for example, if you see the skull in Hamlet or the poison in Othello, then you can actually connect with that theme of the poem or the organic whole of that poem or that play. Therefore, he prefers these symbols over the allegories, and he used this term concrete universals to refer to these organic wholes and these symbols. You can also see the concrete universal was talked about by Aristotle and Immanuel Kant when he talked about the subjective universality. So that was all about Coleridge, guys, and in the next class we will see Percy Bysshe Shelley's Defense of Poetry. And if you have any doubts or any questions, or if you find any mistake, please feel free to correct them or ask those questions in the comments down below. If you like this video, give a thumbs up, share it with your friends, press the bell icon and subscribe the channel. Thank you and have a very nice day.